Welcome to the Hard Truth Podcast. This is Jeremy Fouts, and today we have a treat for you. We have a special guest, Lara Jones, one of the most respected speakers in grit, and an award-winning leadership performance and grit development expert. And all of you that know that you have listened to me for years know that I'm all about grit and leadership. So I'm excited for you to be on with us today, Lara. I want to read a little bit more about you for the audience knows who's speaking to them. She's also an international keynote speaker, creator of the Global Grit System, and creator of the Grit Top Indicator, founder and CEO of two global businesses. Be a legend. I cannot wait for you to tell me about that. And also the Grit Global, author of best-selling book, Hunt or Be Hunted. I got this book the other day, Lara, and I'm about halfway through. Really enjoy this book, and she's an executive coach as well as a competitive athlete. And isn't it amazing, Lara, how competitive athletics definitely helps develop that grit. And so I'm excited to hear a little bit more about you as an athlete as well. She's originally from the UK and now residing in Arizona. She has a track record of skyrocketing companies into multi-million-dollar empires. She has been crowned the Worldwide Stevie Award 9 times for Women of the Year, Female Entrepreneur of the Year, Female Executive of the Year, and Best Female Thought Leader of the Year. Of her creation of the Global Grit System, the Grit Top Indicator, and her contributions within her field, most recently being featured on the NASDAQ billboard in New York Times Square for winning an international award for the Top Grit Performance Expert of the Year. Lara Jones, that's quite a resume, quite a amazing accomplishments that you have accomplished in your career. And not only do I want to share that with the audience, I just want the audience to have a chance to get to know a little bit more about you as an individual, your journey. I've definitely got a lot of questions that I want to ask you today for the audience, but it's a pleasure to have you on, Lara.
Let's go!
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. And what a wonderful intro as well. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your audience with me today. It's always an honor to be able to share stories and have this discussion on grit. And most importantly, the development of grit, which I can go into a little bit later. But thank you for having me on.
It is our pleasure, Lara, and I love the UK accent as well. I get so many people that give me a hard time for my Texas accent, but your accent's probably gets a lot more good things said about it versus my Texas accent. But let's just jump right into it, Lara. I've got a list of about 10 questions I want to ask you, as I'm excited to have you on. You definitely portray everything that I stand for, from leadership to grit. And I know that, reading and learning a little bit more about you, you've had a lot of different things happen in your life as far as, adversities and different things. I tell everyone adversity is either just now left or it's on its way. And how did you, in your career and a little bit about your life, how did you push past the worst point in your life and still see the light on an everyday basis?
It's a good question. And here's the thing with grit, most people think that you either have it or you don't. And actually, that's a myth, because everybody has grit. We're actually born with grit. It's innate in us. It's something that, 10,000 years ago, if we had a fear we're going to get eaten by a lion or a tiger or something, it's still within us. It's our brains are wired that way to protect us. So we actually do all have grit. The difference is we have different levels of it. And why is that? And I've always said that grit is a muscle. And so you got to keep using it. Put yourself in the environment. The experiences that you are exposed to can also help develop that grit. So why is it that some individuals like myself, who have been through some horrific experiences in my life, have still been able to pull from that grit, and what I coined the term grit through it, can grit through anything, right? I'll just tell you a little bit about, it wasn't always that way. right? It's not like I was just born this way and that was it. I've gone through some horrific experiences in my life. I talk about it in my book. Obviously, if you've read it, you know that in chapter 2, I tell a little bit about my life and my background. And so that grit that I discuss is something that I used to think was one focus, and that was you just got to get back up, brush everything off, and away you go again. Now, even though that is a big part of grit, I realized that 2.5 years ago, which I'll tell the story of in a moment, but 2.5 years ago, when I went through the worst tragedy of my life, I could not pull from my dominant side of my grit. And so I had to learn and develop other areas of grit. So what do I mean by that? Well, always throughout my life from the age of 14, had a very tough time as a teenager, had a lot of bad things happen. Again, in my 20s, a lot of different types of adversity. Anyone that wants to know or go into it, get the book, Hunt or Be Hunted. I talk about it in chapter 2. But 8 years ago, I moved from England to the United States of America because I had a dream. And it's something that I have wanted to prove to people from a very young age, that you can do anything that you want to do if you really put your mind to it. But the biggest reason that people do not pursue that dream, or maybe they give up, right, very early on, is because they lack the belief. And maybe they lack the courage to be able to pull themselves from what I call the fear zone into what I call the learning zone. See, most people think that in order to achieve growth in any area of our lives, we start at comfort. And why? Because that's a safe space for us. It's where we all come from. But in order to get there, we have to go through a fear zone. Well, a lot of people think that if I break the fear, I'll get straight to growth. But there's a great big gap that's missing between fear and growth. And I call it the learning zone. And it's called the learning zone for a reason, because most of us don't know how to break out of that fear into the learning zone and then apply what it is that we have been learning in a practical way to then achieve the growth. What do I mean by this? Well, let me just go back and tell you the story. So 2.5 years ago, after moving to the States from 8 years ago, with nothing, by the way, other than just a laptop and my brain, I started from scratch. I used to be a sales director. I was a business development director as well over in the UK. I led sales teams. I built companies from the ground up. Did a lot of great work over there in helping organizations become market leaders in their industry. Loved it. Had a great time. And with one of the companies, there was a phenomenal team. Loved the culture. Loved the people. But I realized that a lot of people that I was surrounded with over there in England just were not of a similar mindset. And I craved to be around people that thought very similar to me. And I knew I'd been exposed to the US some years prior. I used to be married to a US Air Force veteran and was exposed to that environment, like culture and so forth. And I just fell in love with it. So I thought, yes, the United States is where I want to be. So when I gave up everything and came out here, it wasn't easy for me. It was actually very difficult. Nobody knew me. I had to build a name for myself again. There were times when I couldn't eat. There were 3 days where I went without food because it was a choice between having a roof over my head or having food on the table. Now, most people, if you think I'm in my fear zone at that point, most people would probably run back to comfort, because why would you put yourself through that? Well, here's the thing. If you choose your own grit before grit chooses you, you're going to be better equipped for when grit does come knocking on your door. Because you said it earlier, Jeremy. You said, grit, you either with adversity, you're either going through it or you've just gone through it or it's coming for you, right?
Oh, yes.
You can't escape it. You can't escape it. We all will face adversity at some point, no matter how major or how minor. Now, bearing in mind everything that I've been through, that you've obviously read in the book, that others in the audience, if you don't know, just get the book, read about it. But I thought to myself, I've gone through the worst of it. Like, this is it. I'm going to make it now in America. I've gone through all the hard times. I'm now choosing my own grit. I'm choosing that, to continue pushing through these challenges and these hard times, because I held on to the one thing that no one could take from me, which was my belief. I believed in myself. And if you believe in yourself, you're motivated to act. And when you're motivated to act and continue doing what it is you want to do, then you actually change how you think. And when you can alter and change your cognition, you're altering your brain processes. And when you alter those brain processes, you can adopt a growth mindset. You've got to adopt a growth mindset in order to apply the very thing that it is you're trying to learn from the first place. So then the question beggars, well, how do you create that belief in people? Well, it starts with the environment that you're in. You have to put yourself in an environment in which you have the autonomy in the way that you want to learn, whether that's through listening, whether that's through visual aids, whether that's through practical elements. And that environment, I mean, that's what I did. I put myself in an environment where I could learn and really instill this belief in myself. And it's either now or never. So that's what I did. And anyone can follow that process, by the way, in anything that you're trying to learn. I talk about that in the book. That's actually chapter 5. I go into explicit detail into that. And it's all scientifically backed. So please, like, adopt that process. Anyway, after I'd moved over here and I'd gone through all of that, I met my husband. We got married. We had children. We had 3 beautiful boys. And then 2.5 years ago, tragedy struck at the worst level that I could possibly ever imagine for anybody. Our youngest son, Jack, passed away, and I nearly lost my life the same night. It was such a horrific experience with everything that had happened that it just changed the trajectory of my life, of my children's lives, my husband's life, of my company, my team, everything around me. It made me evaluate everything on a much, much, much deeper level. And when I say that I nearly died that night, my blood pressure had dropped to 53/37. My organs were failing. They were shutting down one by one by one because I'd lost so much blood and I didn't have enough blood in me for my heart to pump around. And so I remember some of the last scenes I remember was that the crash cart was brought in. I had to say goodbye to my husband. And I just remember staring at the machine with it just falling lower and lower and lower with my blood pressure, that I knew this was it. And so I'm a realist. And I said to myself, all right, Lara, you're going to die. You're going to die. There's nothing you can do about it from a physical standpoint. So either you die and that's it, or you die and subconsciously somehow I'm going to have this fight in me that I'm going to be brought back to life. And so I kept holding on to that belief that I was going to be brought back to life. And I was just holding on to that and holding on to that. And I said, okay, you can't do anything physically about the situation right now, but the one thing that you can still have control over is your mind. It's how you think. And so I applied a technique that so many others, I teach this to so many others, called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, where I transported my thinking that I was back at home with my living children. And I said, what are the 5 things you can see? What are the 4 things you can hear? What are the 3 things you can feel? What are the 2 things that you can smell? What's the 1 thing you can taste? And you know what that did? It actually saved my life. And how? Because it reduced my anxiety, which reduced my heart rate. So I was able to slow my heart rate down, which gave the nurses and doctors those extra few seconds to try to figure out how to get the 16 gauge needle into my collapsed veins with the blood that saved my life. And when I did that and they were able to save my life by getting that blood into me, they then whisked me off into surgery and saved my life. Now, the aftermath of that was equally just as horrific. I woke up from surgery and the first thing I was asked was, well, do you want your son buried or cremated? Where do you want to transport his body? We need to know what funeral directors you want to use. Here's a death certificate. I was thrown with so many different questions. I couldn't comprehend what they were even saying and how I should even answer and what the heck just happened, right? I was thrown into a world of utter trauma, grief, and you name it, like I was having to face it. And I had to leave hospital without my child. And let me tell you, as a mother, as a human being, as just a person that has such deep regard for human life, that was for me by far one of the hardest things I've ever done. And when I was home, I did not want to sleep, upstairs of the home. I wanted to stay on the couch. I didn't want to go anywhere close to where, the whole scenario unfolded. And I lay on that couch, for 4 months. 4 months went by and I was in a pretty dark space. Now, bearing in mind, I was also a leader, right? A leader of a company. And I was the sole earner for the family. So there was a tremendous amount of pressure on me. Now, most people would say, well, how did you not just give up? How did you not just give up? It's the easiest thing for me to do. I could have just given up. But you know what? I had 2 little children that relied on me. I had a whole team of people that were relying on me to feed their children. I had a lot of other people that knew me, that respected me, that looked up to me. And if I gave up at that moment, what would that say about the belief in others? So I felt like I had this duty that I had to pull from some type of grit. I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until 4 months later that I woke up in Jack's room, and that was my son that passed. And I stared at myself in the mirror and said, you know what, Lara, you got to wake up today. Your son did not. You get to feel the sun on your skin today. Your son does not. Stop making this about you. This is not about you. This is about others. What are you going to do with all that pain, that grief, that trauma? How are you going to use that as a fuel to help empower others?
Right.
And then in order to do that, I had to say to myself, well, how have I grit through the past few months? What have I pulled from?
Right.
Because there were days when I couldn't even face the world or get up. So how did I get through those past few months without saying that was it? I give up. Well, I realized that, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people knew me as a go-getter. I'm a get-it-done person. I'm one of those people that can just get up, brush things off, start again. Any challenges you throw at me, there's always a solution. Always. But in this case, this involved my son's life. I could not bring him back to life, which is what I thought the solution should be. So I couldn't pull from the dominant trait of my grit, which is the go-getter, the get-it-done element. And I realized that I was actually pulling from the R in my grit, which was the reframing of thinking. So I started saying to myself, instead of saying, look what happened to me, I would say, look what revealed me. And instead of saying, look what was taken from me, I would say, look what was given to me. And when you say those different words in a sentence to something of adversity that's happened to you, no matter how major or minor, you actually have a physiological response, which changes your brain chemicals. It literally rewires your brain. It starts to change the way that you're thinking, which alters your brain processes. And you've obviously got to practice this. It takes time to be able to do this. But that's the first stage in starting to reframe how you think about situations. And it was through that reframing that I felt, instead of feeling like I was drowning and trying to keep my head above water, that suddenly one day I felt like I was floating on the water, right? And I was able to just keep myself stable with my head above water, breathing and not feeling like I was about to drown. I realized as well in that moment, as I was reframing how I thought about the situation, that it wasn't just impacting me as an individual or as a leader, it was impacting everyone around me.
Absolutely.
Because suddenly they saw someone that, not just as a leader or as a mother, but someone that has gone through some of the worst things that you think life can throw at you. And I started seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, which unfortunately there are many out there that do not. And that's how my global grit system started to be born, because I realized that through impacting others and innovating my way out of challenges, they didn't become challenges anymore. They became opportunities. And that's where the T comes in from my grit, where you've now got to take responsibility, because any action or inaction that you take has a consequence.
Yes.
And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, I have 4 elements to grit. There's get it done, reframe thinking, impact others, and take responsibility. And then to the side of that, I realized that means that there's 4 different types of people out there that have grit. That means every single human being in this world has grit. We just have different levels of it. Every single one of us has more of a dominant trait. Is it the go-getter? Is it the reframer? Is it the innovator? Is it the trustworthy titan? We don't know. That's how I developed the grit type indicator, which you mentioned earlier when you introduced me, which is an assessment that actually helps understand from a percentage scale how much of a G, an R, an I, or a T that you are. Why is that useful? Why is that helpful? 1, it identifies where your dominant trait is when it comes to challenges that come your way. 2, it helps you identify the areas of your weakness so you can start to learn techniques and tools to be able to up that skill set so you are more well-rounded in grit. Because like me, when my son passed away, I tried to fall to my dominant grit type because that's all I knew. And it didn't work. And that's when I realized I had to pull from another element of grit. And that's how this was born and how it was started to be discovered. And I thought, if everybody could just understand that they do have grit, every single person listening, you have grit, you just have different levels of it. Identify which one it is, right? And so that's what I do now. I travel all over the country as a keynote speaker. I've developed programs. I coach people, teams, individuals, and I help them understand the different areas of grit and how to develop it. That's the most important. A lot of people talk about grit, but I focus on developing that grit in people, in teams, in companies, because that's going to change the trajectory of your thinking. It's going to change the trajectory of your behavior, which in turn, again, impacts so many others. So I know that was a very long-winded answer, Jeremy, to your question. I'm
It
glad
was
we were
a
able
awesome, it
to
was an awesome
focus
answer,
on
Laura. And first off, I mean, I've definitely got to say my condolences to every losing a son. I could not imagine. I've got two boys, as you and I was visiting, 16, or actually 17 and 15 now. And I could not imagine what that hurt and that pain is like. But, as I've taught leadership for 25 years, I tell everyone, you find out what kind of grit you have and what kind of leader you are when you're going through hell, but you keep going. And so you have definitely met that definition of a true leader and someone to be able to take that experience, though, and develop this system and put it to work to help others. I mean, it's mind blowing to me the amount of people that they understand the importance of nutrition. They understand the importance of physical activities, whether it be lifting weights, running, but they don't understand the power of the mind and what we need to do for the mind in order to develop into that leader that we need to be. And that's something I've always been really hard on my boys is you can't just go hit to become a good hitter. We've got to put good things in our mind. We've got to change the questions, as you mentioned, that we're asking ourselves. You don't change the answers by just thinking up
that.
the answers. You have to change the questions of what we are asking ourselves on a daily
Exactly
basis.
right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I want to ask you a couple more questions. And, first of all, I want to, the name of the book, Hunt or Be Hunted. This is definitely not a list of questions I had in mind to ask you, but I have to ask, what made you come up with that title? I love the name of that title because that's life. People are going through this life like they're not competing to win. And I've
Hmm.
told everyone that I've mentored for the last 25 years, this is a competition. Life is going on. And we are either going to be hunting something or we're going to be hunted. And so, how did you come up with that title of
Oh,
the
I love
book?
that question. I love that question. It was for me. It was a no-brainer. I've always been told like you're a hunter. In other words, I mean, in sales, you've heard of hunters and farmers, right? Hunters are the
Mm-hmm.
ones that they go out and find new business. The farmers are the ones that nourish and nurture the existing relationships. And so everyone is kind of, one or the other when you're in that sales environment. But coming out of that, every single person again in the world is either hunting for business or hunting in their field of interest or whatever it is that they're doing, right? Even if you get up and you go into the gym and you're hunting, you're striving for that goal that you have that day, um, or you're being hunted. And what I mean by that is, and there'll be some people in the audience that might immediately say, oh yeah, I'm a hunter. There might be some that say, well, no, I'm kind of neither. That's not true. You're either one or the other. And let me tell you, if you don't know which one you are, you're being hunted. It's as simple as that. Hunters know that they're hunters. And the ones that are being hunted, you can absolutely change that mindset and become the hunter. But it's all about being focused and dedicated and committed to that one specific goal that you have in your mind of where you want to be. The biggest reason that I wanted the book to be called Hunt or Be Hunted, I wanted a title that was very bold, that really caught the attention of people. Because if you get to know me, like I'm not the type of person that messes around, right? I am a very direct individual. I have a kind heart, but I'm also very direct. And I think that's also because of everything that I've gone through in life. And I also know what it's like to nearly lose your life. And so time is short, right? We don't know what could happen tomorrow
No.
or the next day. And life is incredibly precious. So it's up to you to do something with it. What is it that you really want to do? What's stopping you from doing the very thing that that you're trying to achieve? It's belief. It's either you don't believe in yourself or you don't have the courage to do it, or you don't know how to do it, right?
Right.
If you don't know how to do it, guess what? There's tools and strategies to help you with that. That's what I teach. If you don't have the belief, guess what? I can help instill that belief. If you don't have the courage, I help you with the courage too. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm so focused on developing that grit in people to let them know, listen, you're either the hunter or you're not. You decide which path are you on. And if you're fine with not being the hunter, great, but then don't complain about not being where you want to be. So if you really do believe that you want to be somewhere in life and this is where I should be, and I don't want to hear the excuses, if people say, well, I couldn't do it because of this, I couldn't do it because of that. You know what my response is? I lost my son. I
Yeah.
nearly lost my life. I couldn't eat at one point. I didn't even have a place to stay at one point in a foreign country. I was sleeping on couches. I was banished from my family for a period of time. I've been through divorce. I've been, sexually abused too, the age of 14. And I talk about that in my book. There's so many different things that I've been through in my life that a lot of people don't even realize because they just look and think, oh, success. Well, let me tell you, the biggest success comes from the biggest failures.
Absolutely.
And that is something I 100% hold on to every single day. If I'm not learning, I'm not growing.
Right.
And if I'm not growing, I'm dying.
Yep.
And so I relate my grit system to those 4 stages of comfort, fear, learning, and growth. And I say, in order to get out of the comfort zone and get into the fear zone, you got to instill the G in your grit. You got to be able to get it done, be the go-getter. And a lot of people, again, they fear that they don't know how to have that. That's actually one of the easiest elements of grit for me to be able to teach people. You got to be able to use the G from that grit to get out of comfort and get into fear. When you're in the fear zone, this is where half the people will run back to comfort because the going will get too tough. They don't know how to push past the uncomfortable. They get scared. They have a fear of the unknown, right? Maybe they have a fear of imperfection even. So they just run straight back to comfort. The other half want to kind of grind it out, but they don't necessarily have the tools and strategies to learn how to get out of fear on the other side. So they just stay in that fear zone, which again is not good, because if you're staying stuck in a fear zone, then your anxiety increases, your stress levels increase, which leads to burnout. And the burnout's going to lead to poor performance, and the poor performance is going to get you fired, or you're going to leave. Right? Or you're going to just end up running back to comfort anyway. So neither one is good, right? So how do you get out of fear? How do you get out of the fear and get into learning? You got to instill the R in grit. You've got to learn about reframing of your thinking. And I talk about that in chapter 7 of the book, Hunter Be Hunted. And there's some exercises in there, so it's well worth the read. But in that, when it comes to reframing how you think, if you can master that, right, and control how you think about specific situations, and I'm talking about when adversity hits or when any type of challenge hits, and it doesn't have to be as severe as what I've been through. It can be, maybe you have been through what I've been through. Maybe you've been through something else that is equally just as painful, right? Maybe you've lost a job. Maybe you've gone through a divorce. Maybe you've lost a loved one. Maybe you've got team members at work that you don't know how to communicate with. Perhaps they don't know how to communicate with you. Whatever the challenge is that you're facing, there is always a way through. If you can harness that R in grit, you will get into the learning zone. And the learning zone is one of the biggest areas where people miss because they think, oh, I've got it now. I'm just going to, get into growth and everything is good. It doesn't work that way. We have to continually apply what it is that we've learned from a practical level in order for our brains to realize, oh, this is okay. Okay, now I've reached a new level of how to do something, or next time something hits, I can pull from my tool bag as it is, because I've taken the time to teach my brain that this is okay. I've got many stories on that, which I know we don't have time to go into today, but there's many stories I have that are true that I've gone through myself that I can help the audience with to really understand. But the point is, once you're in the learning, that's where you're really innovating, right? And you've got to pull from the I in the grit, where you're impacting others through innovation in order to achieve that growth. Because if you can innovate your way out of challenges, they don't become challenges, they become opportunities. Yes. And when you innovate, right, you are now applying what it is that you've been learning and you're teaching your brain. That's what's going to achieve the growth. And when you're at the growth, the T in grit comes in, because now you've got to take responsibility to start that whole process all over again. Yes. And your new growth level has just become your new comfort. And the process just continues. And let me tell you something. I want to explain this because I talk about this in chapter 3 of the book. I talk about myths, and I'm sure you've read this part, Jeremy. But there's a big myth going around that grit is a grind and that it leads to
Hmm.
burnout. Grit does not lead to burnout.
Yeah.
Grit unchecked leads to burnout. What do I mean by that? Well, in order to be able to check your grit, you have to follow the 5 pillars. And I talk about that, and you probably know exactly what they are.
Yes.
But you've got to get your sleep. You've got to get 8 hours of sleep. You've got to drink a gallon of water. You've got to get that exercise in every day, at least 5 days a week. You've got to get that heart rate elevated. And you've got to eat clean. I'm huge on
Oh,
nutrition. I'm really big on it because it also, everything that you're putting in your body, right, is affecting your performance, whether you know it or not. Your organ, your brain is an organ, so you got to give it what it needs, right? We always talk about looking after our heart and everything. Well, what about your brain? It needs sleep, it needs water, it needs good food, it needs exercise. You also need to get a bit of sunlight every day, just for 10 to 15 minutes, preferably in
yes.
the morning. Helps your circadian rhythm, helps you sleep better, right? But all of these pillars, in fact, I actually have 2 bonus ones. A lot of people can't always handle it when I tell them what it is, because it's, most people in this world do them, as in, you shouldn't do the two that I'm like, I've got 2 bonus pillars and I say, don't do this and don't do that. And most people have a really tough time with it. But if you want to know that, you have to get in touch with me. Anyone that's listening, you want to know what those bonus pillars are? Find me on LinkedIn, or go to my website, larajones.com, and reach me that way. And I'll be more than happy to share that with you. But most importantly, follow those 5 pillars, because those 5 pillars is going to really help change how you think about situations and how you handle that grit when it comes knocking for you. And if you think that you can escape this world without having any grit, you think again. It will find you, and it will find you at the least time, the moment when you're least expecting it, just like it did with my son. And that for me was the biggest portion of grit I've ever gone through in my entire life. And I
Right.
couldn't fall back on my dominant trait. I had to learn the other areas of grit, which is why I realized I have to share this with the world, because there's so many people out there that might take their life, that might think there's not another way through, and they fall down and they can't get back up, right? I don't even want to think like that. I want people
Right.
to realize there is always, always, always a way through. It might not feel like it at the time. Maybe, you've got to evaluate your environment. You've got to create what I call your culture of excellence. You've got to have the people around you that are going to help support and lift you up in those times when you really feel like falling down.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing I think your story does, Laura, I've coached individuals for 25 years myself, and I've worked with so many people that they thought they was going through hell, and they had very minor problems, really, and seriously, compared to what you went through. So I think your story makes a lot of people recognize that, man, my life is really not that bad. My situation is not really that bad. Now, I'm not trying to say that there's not someone that has dealt with issues as large as yours or even larger, but I've watched so many people that, you know what, it's not as bad as you think. You have some issues that we're going to work through. We look at them as an opportunity, as a challenge to become better, because the next time that adversity comes, we're a better, stronger individual. I've got to ask you this question. I know our audience would ask this question is, okay, I want to develop grit. Okay, I'm going to buy your book. Absolutely. You can tell us in a few minutes where to purchase the book. I am going to apply those 5 pillars that you're talking about. And that's what I teach every day as well, Laura. We're totally in alignment to that. But also, I want to know, is it going to take me a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, a year? And I work with a lot of, middle-aged men that have neglected their health for 30 years. And it's hilarious. They'll come to me with a big old gut, and they come to me and complaining about all these issues. And 2 weeks into their workout regimen, me giving them their macros to follow, they'll say, I'm just not really seeing no results. And I'm like, oh my God, it took you 30 years of neglecting your health, and now you're not where you want to be in 2 weeks. And I just want to know what you think. As if I'm asking you today, I call you up, I email you, I reach out to you on Instagram, LinkedIn, and I say, I want you to coach me. I want you to help me. But I've got this question, Laura. How long is it going to take me? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, years to be able to develop this grit and become this leader that I need to be?
I love that question. You know how I answer that? How long do you want it to take? And some
Exactly.
people look at me and they're like, what do you mean? I say, well, how long do you want it to take? How committed are you to actually
Yeah.
wanting to change? How committed are you to wanting to develop the grit? To me, learning, whether it's grit, whether it's nutrition, whatever it may be, right? It's lifelong. It's
Hmm.
lifelong because actually it's habits. That's what we're changing. So developing grit is a habit that you have to instill in yourself every single day. Like you have to ingrain it in your DNA. It has to become part of who you are. When someone says, who are you? I'm someone that just can face challenges head on. I have the grit to do anything, like push past that uncomfortable. It's something that has to be built within you. You mentioned earlier about me being a competitive athlete. I'm just going to let you into something that I actually didn't become a competitive athlete until 2 years ago. And I remember entering that training center, wanting to be like everybody else and seeing how hard they worked. And I
Hmm.
realized they're just human beings.
Right.
Why can't I do what they're doing?
Right.
Right? I started instilling the belief. I didn't start off with the muscle mass that I've been able to gain today. I didn't start off like that. In 2 years, I've completely transformed physically and also like, with the amount of weight now that I can lift and so forth. I couldn't do that 2 years ago,
Right.
but 2 years later, here I am competing in one of the World Series Fitness of Racing as a pro. And in fact, I was doing that a year and a half into my journey. So if I'm able to do that after everything else that I've faced, then if someone comes up to me and says, well, I can't do what you do. No, it's just that you don't want it enough. Because
Right.
if you really do want it, you will find a way. You will
Absolutely.
figure it out like a way through. Now, my system helps them get there quicker because I help develop it in all areas. But I could reframe someone's thinking in 2 minutes. I've done it on stage in front of thousands of people. In order to develop all the areas of grit, it does take time, right? But it also depends on your commitment, your dedication
Yes.
to it. Because when the going gets tough, guess what's going to happen? Some people are going to run back to that comfort,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Some people are just going to keep trying to grind it out and not seek the help that they need. But
Right.
the ones that do, the ones that come to you for nutrition or the ones that come to me to develop that grit and help them get through some of these tough times, they're the ones that are going to excel and get into that learning zone a lot quicker than the others. I've
Absolutely.
always said, like, I didn't get to where I am today on my own. I'm sure you didn't either, right?
No.
I put myself in an environment. I surrounded myself with key people, mentors, coaches, people that were better than me, that had done more than me. I didn't feel threatened by them.
No.
I loved it. I wanted to learn from them. I was like a sponge. I was like, teach me. How did you do this? All the athletes that I trained with, I worked my socks off to be able to get into the elite class at that training center so I could compete and learn from the lions that were there. I was like a
Yeah.
baby cub when I joined there, right? I was a baby cub. In fact, the reason I had the certificate in the back is it shows I was rookie of the year when I first joined that training center. And that is something that was so significant to me because I was voted as Rookie of the Year because it showed my dedication and my hard work. And I thought, you know what? People believe in me here. They believe in
Yes.
me. I'm around the right people. And
Yeah.
that for me was something that just helped. I held on to that belief, right, in my athleticism. And that's why I'm at the level that I'm at now. And don't think that I'm comfortable with where I'm at because I'm not. Like there's a
No.
heck of a long way to go. There's a lot more I want to do there. And that's the thing, that's the key. You've always got to want like, to keep learning. And when you get to that growth level, remember what I said, that new growth now becomes your comfort and you got to start the process again. So really the question comes back to how long do you want it to take?
Yeah. Yeah. And why would you want it to be a project that's going to find an ending? You should always want
Right.
to strive to be the best, to be the best, to
Yep.
be, that's when I'm working with clients and they say, well, how long is it going to, they ask me the same question. I'm like, this is an ongoing project if you want to live a prosperous, fulfilling life. You should get to a point from a leadership and a grit standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint, a physical, standpoint, and you should not find comfort. You should push yourself to go to that next level continuously. That's the way life is designed. It's pretty simple. I've used the old analogy from Jim Rohn for many of years. A tree in the front yard has one intention, and that is to grow as big as it can, roots as deep as it can, as many branches as tall as it can. And that's the way we as humans are going to be fulfilled, is on a daily basis, pushing ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, relationships, to be the best that we can be. So I've got one more
100%.
question for you, Laura. I
Well,
could
actually,
talk to you literally.
before you ask that question, and sorry, Jeremy, I want to jump in on something that you just
Yes,
said,
absolutely.
because I agree with you 100% that, and here's the thing, some people listening, some people out there that may be watching for the first time, they may be thinking, oh, that sounds great, but it sounds tiring. Let me tell you, if you follow the 5 pillars, if you follow those 5 pillars, you will not get tired, right? I travel nationally, internationally, right? As a speaker, I develop workshops, I develop programs, I have little kids, I'm a wife, I run a business, I run a team. I am pulled in so many different directions,
Right.
right? So many different directions. And by the way, I also sit on the advisory board for a big nonprofit called Warrior Rising, where they help veterans that transition from military to start their own businesses. I'm very passionate about veterans, and hugely supportive of them. And so I'm pulled in all these different directions. How do I still have the energy to do what I do? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm a competitive athlete, by the way. I forgot to even throw that one in there.
Right.
But how do I do it? I
Yeah.
follow the 5 pillars. And if anyone tells me, well, you just have more energy than others, yeah, maybe because I follow the 5 pillars. And
Right.
I will tell you this, if you're feeling tired, drink water, right? It's nothing to do with anything else. You're probably dehydrated. Most of us walk around and they're dehydrated. If you're
Stay.
craving sugar, right?
Yeah.
Drink electrolytes, drink some salts, because
Yes.
your body needs those salts. You need electrolytes. In fact, one of the first things in the morning, instead of going for that coffee, that actually dehydrates you. When you wake up in the morning, you're dehydrated, right? So
Yes.
why are you drinking coffee that dehydrates you even more?
Yes.
A lot of people find this opinion very unpopular, but it's not an
No,
opinion,
it's
it's a fact.
truth. Yes.
The first thing I do, I get up and I go get my electrolytes, and
Yes.
I pound those electrolytes down. I drink
Yes.
those, and it helps just, get awake. So there's so many different things that you can do, but it's a choice, right? Remember that, take
Yes.
responsibility, that tea and grit. You got to take responsibility of your actions. Take ownership of the
Yes.
fact that if you feel tired, well, that's because you probably haven't drank enough water. So go drink some
Yes.
water, right? There's so many different things. Anyway, so I just wanted to jump in on that.
No, and that's what I don't look at it as a way that someone should think about. Why am I going to get tired because I'm training? No, you look at it as, this is the 5 pillars. This is the fuel that I need to be the
Yep.
best I
Yep.
can be on a
Yep.
daily basis, for my team that's responsible for me, for my kids,
Yep.
being the example, for the people that are working with me, beside me. I mean, that should
Yep.
be the fuel that don't bring a being tired of doing the same thing. It'd be like excitement. This is the fuel that's
Yep.
making me the best that I can be. So
Well,
I do.
I think is I think, sorry, Jeremy, I was going to say, I
No,
think
go
as
ahead.
well that it's really important as well for people when they wake up first thing in the morning. If you don't feel like doing something, you have to absolutely 100% know your why. In other words, know your mission and know your purpose. Because after my
Absolutely.
son passed away and after I nearly lost my life, I said, okay, I'm going to make it my mission to impact at least one person for at least one day, for every day that I'm breathing. And my purpose in life is to empower belief and transform futures. It's as simple as that. And
Yeah.
so I'm reminded every single morning that I wake up and I say, if I, because we're not perfect, right? We might wake up and say, I feel a little tired today. I feel like I just need to rest. No, immediately you think of your mission. You think, what is
Yes.
my mission? Today's a gift, right? I've always said that. I have signs about that. Today's a gift, long before I actually nearly lost my life. But now I've gone through that experience. It's even more important to me that today is a gift. Every day that we're living and breathing is a miracle. And therefore, use it wisely. Don't waste it. My
Yeah.
son doesn't get the chance. So if you're
No.
living and breathing, you better do something with that.
Yeah.
Don't waste it. And my son didn't get that opportunity. So I'm very passionate about that. And I think if people really fully understood their mission and their purpose in life, and I'm not just talking about when you work for a company and understanding that mission and purpose, you need to understand what your own vision is, your purpose, your mission. So you are reminded every single day you wake up, this is why I do what I do. And if you're not
Yes.
sure on that, start exploring that. Start thinking about what that is. There's lots of different ways you can do that. Just reach out to me and I can help you with that.
Absolutely, Laura. Love it. I know that I'm traveling now. I'm going to get back to the studio and I'm going to be booking another podcast with you to spend a lot more time with you. I'm actually at the University of Oklahoma right now, about to go to my son's ball game. So I'm going to ask you one more question, but you will be back on here shortly if your schedule allows for us to spend more time. We align together perfectly. We believe in the same things. I believe in your book. I believe in your
I
mission,
love
your
the name of your
leadership.
podcast, The Hard
Yes.
Truth. We're
The
going to speak
hard
the hard
truth.
truth.
Yeah, well, and I named it the hard truth, obviously, because a
Yeah,
lot of
I
people
love it.
they're looking for the cheat code, right? They're looking for
Yep,
the easy way. They're looking for, and
yep,
there is no thing. I mean, it's
yep,
the hard truth is doing the things on a daily basis that you don't want to do till it becomes a discipline. All the things you
yep.
talk about in your book, but how does my audience find out more about you? I know you mentioned your LinkedIn, but more importantly, how they can get this book.
So the book's available on Amazon. So if you just go on
Okay.
Amazon, type Hunt or Be Hunted, type Lara Jones, it's Lara. There's no U in my name. So it's Hunt or Be Hunted, Lara Jones. The book will come up in Amazon. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can find me if you put if you put Lara Jones, and then Grit Global, I will come up. You can follow me or connect with me there. And on my website, larajones.com, I actually have something for the audience as well. If they are interested in it,
Yes.
that I can give away to them today, as a way of just, saying thank you for listening. But if you text the word grit, it's a GRIT, to 55444, so that's grit to 55444, you'll actually get access to the Global Grit Accountability Guide. So I just go over the Global Grit system and more in brief, but it gives you a bit more of an overview. And there's some exercises in there that you can do with yourself, or you can start instilling them maybe with some others. I mainly work with a lot with teams and companies, but I do work with individuals. I'm an executive coach, so I do have some individuals that come to me. And I also have just introduced, very exciting, but I've just introduced some VIP days. So if anyone wants to spend the day with me, they will train with me with fellow athletes. You don't have to do that part if you don't want to. I highly encourage it, but you can. And then you spend the day with me and we go over your business goals. It could be personal, individual, it could be something that you're stuck with at work or in a team or as a leader, whatever it may be. You spend the day with me and we outline that plan and we go through it. So I've just introduced those VIP days, very exciting. But if you want to learn more about that, then just reach out to me on LinkedIn, like I said, or text the word grit to 55444 and you can reach me that way as well.
Well, Lara Jones, I hope our audience takes advantage of that opportunity. Thank you for giving that gift to my audience, and thank you for joining us today. Cannot wait to spend more time and have you back on the podcast for the hard truth. Those of you listening, I encourage you to share this podcast with someone that you think has went through a tragedy, that's thinking there's got to be more out of life, but I really don't know the way in order to do that. Take this book as your part of your journey and explore how to get that grit and that leadership back in your life and continue going forward life and to be the best you can be. So thank you for joining us. Share with your friends and family. And Lara Jones, thank you. It's been a huge opportunity to introduce you to the Hard Truth audience.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Let's go.